Howdy, Full Metal Cowboy Straight shooting a review of the film adaptation of Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical phenomenon, The Phantom of the Opera. I started reviewing musicals a couple of years ago with Phantom of the Opera since it was the first musical I ever listened to. And sure, I haven't reviewed a lot of musicals on my channel, but it is a work in progress. I do plan on reviewing more musicals eventually. It's just there are other mediums I actually want to focus on before I actually start tackling musicals. But this is a review of the 2004 film adaptation directed by Joel Schumacher, who is infamous for Batman and Robin. Let's move on to another topic. I don't really want to talk about Batman and Robin just yet. For over a decade, the 2004 film adaptation of the musical The Phantom of the Opera has been met with a mixed reception. There are some people that have mixed thoughts on this film. Some people flat out hate this adaptation, and there's even a minority of people who actually really liked this film adaptation. I happen to fall in the minority. Now, I do acknowledge that this film adaptation has its issues that the Broadway show does better on, and I would go as far as to say that this is actually the weakest version of the musical in comparison to the original Broadway cast, which is Michael Crawford as the Phantom and Sarah Brightman as Christine Daae, as well as the 2011 Royal Albert Hall performance, which had Ramin Karimloo as the Phantom. Those versions are better than this film adaptation. From what I've researched, this film adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera was planned to be released in the early 90s, and it was going to have the original cast playing their respective characters. Unfortunately, Sarah Brightman and Andrew Lloyd Webber were going through a divorce. Obviously, this plan didn't work out. So it took until 2004 to finally get this film adaptation out. Now, when you translate a musical into film, there's liberties that obviously need to be taken. And I would argue the set designs in this film adaptation will appear differently than the stage show, and that is to be expected. And I'm fine with this, because the set design in this film adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera is actually really well set. Also, for the most part, this film is shot well. Except for some awkward shots here and there, which is just a minor gripe I have with this film adaptation of the Phantom of the Opera musical. There is some baffling directing throughout this film adaptation of the Phantom of the Opera, such as certain scenes being in black and white while a great majority of the film is in color. And about those black and white scenes, they chronologically take place after everything that has happened throughout the entire film. So, all the scenes in color, and then all the black and white scenes. The black and white aesthetic made no sense given the context of the story. Usually, the use of black and white in a film like this would be reserved for flashbacks. That would be an appropriate use of black and white, not events that take place everything after. This film also contains some odd editing in some moments. There's a jump cut in one scene, and it only lasts for almost a second, and then back to what we're supposed to be focusing on. And I was just wondering, what was the point of that jump cut just now? Nothing! And now, the integral part to this film, the music. Because this is an adaptation of a musical, which was also an adaptation of the novel of the same name by Gaston Leroux. The one thing that's nice about the music in this film adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera is that the instrumentation is on point. But of course, the big factor is the singing, which could have been a lot better. Say what you will about Gerard Butler as the Phantom, but I do not absolutely hate his performance as the Phantom. It's just unfortunate that his singing is mostly laughable.
Look at your face in the mirror. I am there inside. This is the point of no return.
And what prevents me from hating Gerard Butler as the Phantom with a passion is that there are some moments where Gerard Butler is fine as the Phantom. In my opinion, the best scene he had with this entire performance is him singing Music of the Night. I had no issue with it at all.
Let your mind start a journey through a strange new world.
What about Patrick Wilson as the other male lead, Raoul?
No more talk of darkness. Forget I'm here. Nothing can harm you. My words will warm and calm you.
Honestly, if you ask me, I found his singing really bland, as if he's trying so hard to hit on the ladies. By far the best performance in this entire film is Emmy Rossum as Christine Daae. Some will say she is so bland in this film, but her singing is actually really good here. A lot better than the laughable singing at times in this entire film. One nice flip side with the music in this film is that the supporting cast can sing well, with the exception of Minnie Driver, although it was not her fault. It was just that Joel Schumacher thought it was a good idea to have her singing overdubbed, which I found this to be another baffling decision on Joel Schumacher's fault. If you're familiar with stories such as Beauty and the Beast and the Hunchback of Notre Dame, you'll find that the plot to the Phantom of the Opera, whether it be the book, the musical, or this film, there's some familiar territory because the Phantom of the Opera centers around a very beautiful young lady and a man who is deformed, much like the Hunchback of Notre Dame and Beauty and the Beast. One could say that the French of many years ago were infatuated with stories like this, that they continue to be retreaded from time to time. I'm fine with that. The plot of the musical was straightforward, and I don't see this as a bad thing because of the way that the book was adapted into a musical. And since this film is a translation of that musical, the same applies here, and I don't have an issue with the plot despite its by the numbers. There are a couple story beats I could do without in this film adaptation. One of them being an unnecessary flash forward, which is in black and white, and the sword fight, which doesn't really add up when the Phantom says, "The world showed no compassion to me!" Another unnecessary thing in this film adaptation is the horse in the sewer. I cannot resist talking about the horse in this film adaptation of Phantom of the Opera. I guess the reason is because maybe the Phantom wanted to impress Christine by having her ride a horse. Hell if I know what the reason the horse was doing down there! While this film has laughable singing and questionable directing choices in it, this film has visually aged well, minus the unmasking scene. Much like the musical, the story, for what it is, kept me invested. And that's the one thing that this film adaptation didn't bastardize on. Sure, there were some unnecessary additions or liberties taken, but not by much. Without a doubt, the musical is a much better experience than the film, but as far as film adaptations of musicals go, I find the film adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera to be an underrated musical film. I am shooting an 8 out of 10 for the 2004 film adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera. Finally, I am done reviewing this film. I can take off my mask. Wearing this thing is unbearable because of perspiration. Now I can move on to something else. I guess I could talk about another musical film since I did mention it a while back. I know just the one. So until then, good day and good night.